recording. Welcome one and all, and thank you very much for attending. This, to my mind, is one of the most important topics around. It's about climate change, it's about sustainability, and it's about how we adapt as individuals and as companies. In this context, we've got a focus on the MRS Net Zero Pledge. Jane Frost has kindly agreed to come along and talk about how it started, Steve, how it's being implemented, and Jem, how it's actually working within companies. So I will bow out for the most part, unless I feel that there is an urgent question that needs to be asked. I would encourage you all to wing in questions as we go along, and then we can decide whether to take them in the course of this or at the end. But I hope it's an enjoyable and an informative session. So Jane, if you'd like to kick off. Oh, and I would warn people that poor Steve has just come back from the dentist. So he's promised not to start dribbling, but give him a bit of sympathy as we go along. And don't look at Jen because he looks entirely too healthy. So off we go, Jane, if you wouldn't be so kind as to introduce yourself and talk about the MRS's role in all this.
Thank you, Louella, and thank you to the AQR for having us or hosting us today. Those of you who don't know me, and I hope I know most of you, I'm Jane Frost and I'm the CEO of MRS for my sins or whatever it is. But it's a job I love, and especially when we're doing something as important as this. There are some things which I think Louella indicated, which are just so big and so important, we have to come together as a sector to do something about it. And I think you'll agree that climate emergency, I hope you'll agree there's a climate emergency, but I think you'll agree that the nature of the action that requires taking to do something about global warming is big and therefore needs collective action. And I think what the power of collective action has been proven in a number of ways, particularly in the last pandemic, when MRS has managed to negotiate on people's behalf with government. That is, it's in big crises like this that your sector body, your trade body, your professional body needs to step up and help everyone come together and to help orchestrate a response, because there's a very great danger that you can say climate problems, they're blooming big, they're too big to me to be able to do anything about. And that's absolutely what we're trying to say the opposite of in doing the Net Zero Pledge, is that everyone can and should do whatever they can. And some years ago, you may be aware, we started the Diversity, Inclusion and Equality programme with a pledge for that. And that really showed that the sector had an appetite to come together when there was something really important on the agenda, and people did come together, and they've been very positive, and that programme has rolled and grown. And I very much see the Net Zero programme as being exactly like that. It is as important, if not more so. I'm not allowed to say that, but it's a bit like, we do have to have a planet to live on. So we're a sector largely of SMEs or even micro businesses. We, 97% of our businesses are in that category of small and medium-sized enterprises. And they don't necessarily have experts on things like both inclusion, but also on particularly on net zero. They don't necessarily have the resources that they can put behind doing something specific for this. So the other reason that collective action is important is that we can actually share resources. So those that know something about it, those that have pioneered it, those that have potentially got more resources than others, can help smaller organizations to achieve and change something on this really important question. And if you still don't believe, and I'm sure this isn't the case, but if you still don't believe that there is a climate emergency and you're not sure about that, then I would urge you to follow the money, because in fact, our clients at Impact 2021 and our clients on the MRS Senior Client Council are all asking for the supply chain to be doing something and to be proving that they are doing something. So even if you don't believe in your heart that there is something going on, and having sat in a no sun Putney for the last month, there has to be something going on. It is really important that you know that your clients are going to be asking for some action. And when we came together to try and develop, with the backing of the accredited company partners, this particular pledge, we've been really, really grateful and warmed by the amount of support that we've had coming together. So Jem and the Insight Climate Collective, and Steve from the Accredited Company Partner Council, and everybody else who's actually jumped up and put their hands up to do something about it. The risk in developing a pledge is that you produce something that only the big people can do. And very much the pledge that we've tried to put together is something that everybody can do, with the resources associated. So you'll see on the website, we've started to develop the resources to support that. So it had to be simple, because this is a very complex area, and I've been blinded by the science more times than I can tell you. So it has to be something that everybody can understand and do something about. It has got to be capable of being achieved, and I think that's what we've got there. It's got to cope with that breadth of size of organisations that we've got within the sector. And most of all, it's got to be ambitious. And we have tried to be ambitious, because I don't know if you heard, I think it was on the radio this morning, somebody was complaining quite rightly that it's not much good deciding to do things by 2050. That's way too late. So we've set a deliberately ambitious target for this, for the net zero pledge, but above all, one that we think if we all come together and act collectively. And I think it was the CMO of Mars who says Impact 2021, we don't expect agencies to go it alone, we expect them to act together. And that's what, as MRS, we are trying to bring the sector together to do, but couldn't do it without all the wonderful help that and belief of the people, both on this call and in other areas. So that's a potted history, if you like, Louella.
Thank you very much. Steve, could you take it forward a bit more? So Jane has given us the broader picture and the context. Can you tell us how it's evolving?
Sure, yeah. So we spent a long time as the climate committee within the MRS discussing how this pledge would work, and what we wanted the road we wanted companies to go on as they move towards more sustainability. And where we realized that the most important thing was to make progress over perfection. So we would start with a relatively simple pledge. And as Jane said, it was really important that this could be signed by one-man bands, 10-person companies, all the way up to Kantar, Ipsos, etc. And so we talked to many of them. I mean, I've been a one-man band myself, and we wanted to make sure that we could work all the way through the organizations. And then we also wanted to make it as simple as possible to sign up to. So we wanted pretty much anyone running a company, any CEO, to say, yes, that's something I want to do, but it's also not so onerous that I have to set up 32 people working on it internally, and as straightforward as possible. So what we went through is a process of going all of the things that we thought were important in terms of sustainability. We ended up whittling them down and focusing less on sustainability now and much more on the net zero. We had seen what the ad agencies had done. So the ad agencies have put in a net zero challenge for 2027, which is why we went for 2026. We saw that profession was getting together, and we wanted to do something similar, but with the view that we could over time move towards more sustainable factors, but we would kick off with something simple for everyone to get involved with. So that was the idea of the initial pledge, which we launched a few months ago. We've now got, I think, 35 or so people signed up to. And the pledge basically says that people will commit to making their company carbon net zero by 2026. The second part of the pledge says in order to do that, they will track and publish their carbon emissions and then try to reduce those carbon emissions, and what they can't reduce, they will offset. So it's basically measure, reduce and offset. And then the only other things on the pledge are about collaborating across the industry and supporting and encouraging each other to try and make all of our companies more sustainable. So that we've launched with a very simple pledge that I honestly think that everyone can sign up to. I can't really, and we've talked to lots of companies and gone through their pain points around the problems associated with it. And from that, we've created a list of FAQs. So we've got help and support that can talk you through the process. We've aligned with a company that has a carbon calculator. It costs money, except if you're a small business. So if you're under 300,000 in terms of turnover, it's free. So we went through all of the types of objections that people might have for, can I calculate my emissions? But also, my big emissions are things like energy in the office. Okay, so we've aligned with an energy company that is a carbon neutral energy company. So then you've got a way of solving that problem as well. And we've also got some recommended offsetting partners. We're not saying that you have to use this energy company or this calculator or the offsetting partners. We just wanted to make it simple. So that's the approach we've taken to the pledge. And having launched it a couple of months ago, we've got some momentum. And then the plan is to try and push that much more significantly in September, October, basically for the rest of this year. If you're like Jem, you might have taken August off. Lots of people were thinking about other things. So we thought September would be a good time to reignite. And this is obviously part of that, and just encouraging people to get in touch, sign up to the pledge, ask questions, help us improve the FAQs, and collaborate across.
Thanks very much, Steve. So Jem, you've been a guinea pig from the sounds of it. Could you possibly take us through what it's been like, even if it's early days?
Hi, thanks, Louella. Yes, I think I've been a guinea pig, a canary in the mine. I feel sometimes like a sacrificial lamb as well. I think I've been many things, and a something else. I think I think of another, but I've been a sort of a thorn in the side as well. So I'm here with slightly two hats on. So I run a business called Firefish, which is now about 70-80 people in across the UK and the US. Like Steve, I have been, when it was one person, two people, so I've experienced the different levels of being a small business. I'm also a founder member of the Insight Climate Collective, in part which we formed together to try and bring some action around some of the frustrations I was having as a small business owner trying to answer the climate crisis. So hopefully we've used our experience and what we've done, along with a load of people who are far smarter than me, to produce some really tangible actions.
I think you might have to describe the Climate Collective as well, just so that people know what it's about.
Yes, I will. The Insight Climate Collective is an action group, essentially, that was formed to bring together the conversation and actions to help solve the climate crisis within the inside industry. So how do we, as impact professionals within our own businesses and using our influence and relationship with our clients, help work towards solutions to the climate crisis? So we've looked at how we're in the process of producing a report called Net Zero Insight, which will be launched in the next few weeks, which starts off by benchmarking the UK research and insight sector CO2 emissions. It looks at the main centers and causes of them. It gives a very clear action plan on how to reduce them, and then it looks wider at how we can influence the conversation and work towards solutions. How we use our understanding of human behaviour, of marketing, of how businesses work to really provide tangible solutions. Some good news from 2019 to 2020, where were the 2 years we looked at the insight sector's emissions. The carbon emissions of the sector almost halved. That's absolutely unprecedented. If we were sitting here 2 years ago, we'd have been talking about can we do a 5%, maybe a 10% reduction in a year. The great thing about that is that it says incontrovertibly that we can do it. Without revealing too much, because there's a lot of detail and really important stuff in the report, but two of the main emission centers in the industry are energy use and air travel. The great news is that it's quite simple to do things about them, and we have some very clear advice, and as Steve mentioned, the partnership with an energy supplier is a great start. Once you start looking into it, green energy is a very murky place, and you will start to hear about all-goes and go-goes and things like that. Luckily, Steve and his team have done that for us, so actually we can be confident in the energy supply that they're suggesting. But if I just rewind slightly, I think as someone who tries to run a business, I recognize there's and talking to many people who are really keen to do something, that you get, I think many of us get to a point where, like, I really want to take some action, I really want to do something, but I've got so many things on my plate. So climate is just, we've got the climate emergency, we've got D&I, we've still got the hangover from Brexit, we've got whatever the hell's happening with GDPR. You know, there are endless, very important strategic initiatives that we all need to take into account and take action on. And of course, there's the small matter of running our businesses as well. And what, you know, why is climate change? Why is this something that we should all really put to the top of the list? And I think there's two reasons. There's a long-term and short-term reason. I'm not sure if it's apocryphal or not, but we worked with Unilever for many years, and when they started their sustainable living plan, the brand managers pretty much used to say, you know, I'm a deodorant brand manager. You know, what the hell do the young men who are, you know, trying to attract women care about the fact that we're saving water or investing in a sustainable supply chain or not using palm oil, or, you know, why does my shampoo or my soap user care about that? And Paul Palmer used to say, you know, if we don't take action to save the world, to save the environment, to protect the environment, in 20 years' time, in many of the markets we work in, there won't be enough water for people to shower. Therefore, no one will be having showers. Therefore, your sales will go through the floor. You know, that's a pretty literal. You know, I can't see how it benefits me now. Just fast forward a few years, and you will see how it benefits. If we need it. The other thing that we found. And it's been true for a long time, but it is off the scale true now. You know, if doing this because it's the right thing to do isn't enough, there are strong commercial reasons to do it. The first, and I don't know how many people are watching this are trying to hire people at the moment. It's quite hard, isn't it? Everybody's trying to hire people, and there aren't enough people there. So people are making decisions on what we used to call soft measures. What are your Glassdoor reviews like? One of the massive ones is, what's your environmental policy? And you know, I think right now, you know, one of the biggest competitive advantage agencies can get is hiring the best people, and one of the biggest attractions is having a really strong environmental policy. So that's really important. The other thing that Jay mentioned is our clients need us to be sustainable on their supply chain. So, you know, we get on more rosters having a sustainability policy. And the third thing that's really key at the moment, the biggest, most emerging sector of our briefs and many other people's briefs that we've talked about are, what is the future of sustainability in, pick a sector, fashion, pensions, healthcare, food, and we found that unless you have a credible environmental policy for your own business, it's very hard to pontificate about what other businesses should do for those. So there are very strong commercial reasons to put this to the top of the agenda. And we found that they paid back in spades. The next thing I always come up against is, well, what the hell do I do? What do I do? And that is that's what, between the MRS and the Insight Climate Collective, I think we are here to help you through. And the MRS FAQ resource is fantastic. The Net Zero Insight report, I hope, will add to that. We have a very clear process. And again, without giving too much away, it starts with find your climate champions. Don't do this alone. There will be many people in your organization who are absolutely passionate about this, who want to get involved. And it's fantastic as someone who runs a business. The amount of initiatives I've tried to push through almost by sheer willpower. This, and diversity and inclusion is another one. The will to do it and the will to get engaged is huge. So we find that really powerful. Then, as Steve says, it's a question of reporting on and reducing your emissions. Like, from a standing start, that's quite scary. How the hell do we do this? But actually, the MRS has a green calculator that can do this. It's actually not that complicated, and it doesn't take that much time if you work through it. It's really important then to set a target. We achieved the ISO 14001 environmental management certification back in 2012, and that is fantastic, because to renew certification every year, you have to set a target to reduce your emissions every year, and it's amazing what you can do. It gets really detailed. How much paper did you use? Reduce it. How many taxis did you use? Reduce them. The best thing we ever did was get rid of your bins. Put 2 bins in the office. There was uproar, but I used to have a bin under my desk. It reduced our rubbish massively, and everyone gets up and has to walk to the bin, so it also boosts your exercise. So there's lots of little tips like that really make a big difference. And then you remove what can't be reduced, and there are some great tips in the report and in the FAQ on how to do that. Change energy supplier, and then you iterate and go again. You iterate and go again, and every year it gets a little bit harder to reduce your emissions, but you can do it. And every year more technology and more better offsetting comes on board to help with the process. So I recognize, because I've been there myself, it can feel daunting. It can feel difficult to know where to start, but with a will and the right team around you and the enthusiasm in your business, using the resources from the MRS and the Insight Climate Committee, I think you'll find that actually it's a relatively straightforward process.
Thank you very much for the whistle-stop tour. I'm interested, I mean, you mentioned a number of things there, but I'm interested in, apart from green energy, what are the main hurdles or the challenges to overcome in selling it into your companies? I think this is both for you, Steve, and for you, Jem. Maybe, Steve, you'd like to take it first.
Sure, yeah.
What's the pushback from within the company?
So, and not just my company, but the other companies I've spoken to about the pledge. So I'll take my company first, because we're in the process of going through B Corp, which means that we become a corporation that balances profit, people, and planet. I was really surprised at our investor. We have a couple of VCs on our board investing in the company, and they loved it. So there was no pushback at all. They thought it was a wonderful thing. Apparently, all of the investors in investment funds were wanting this type of thing anyway. So I got no pushback from the board. In fact, the opposite, a lot of enthusiasm. The same is true internally. And actually, the same has been true with all of the companies we've spoken to. So very few people, I haven't yet spoken to anyone who doesn't believe there's a climate emergency. I haven't spoken to anyone yet who believes they shouldn't be doing this. I have spoken to lots of people who are confused about how. So they're not sure of the process is, how difficult it is, how expensive it is, if they're going to offset, is that going to cost them enormous amounts of money? The answer, and that's why we put the FAQs together. That's the exact reason why we've worked with Gem to try and make everything as clear and simple as possible. And we've been taking the feedback from different companies to try and make it as simple as possible. So the feedback, the problems we've had and other people have had are all about the implementation rather than about whether they should do it, or so far anyway.
What about you, Jem?
I think Steve and I are in the invidious position that we're the CEO of the business. So, you know, if we buy into it, then it's got a chance. I think, you know, the flip side, as Steve said, is like, as I said earlier, it is not, there is not, it's one of those initiatives that is so welcome throughout the whole business that almost we can't move fast enough. And actually, sometimes, you know, we have to take a step back. You know, there will be some people in the business that want to ban all flights. There are some people in the business who don't want to work for any businesses that are not net zero. So we have debates about, is it okay to work for energy companies? Is it okay to work for holiday companies? That, you know, there's a you know, is it okay to work for the Australian Tourist Board, who are encouraging us to fly to Australia? Not at the moment, obviously, but when they will be encouraged us to fly, you know, and some people feel very passionate that it's not. There's another argument that actually you can make much more difference. Jess Long from Ipsos makes it very clearly. You can make much more difference with what she calls brown companies in making a small difference to an energy company's emission profile has far more effect than on a organic radish company. So, you know, but one of the things at the ICC we realized very early on, it's very important that businesses provide a space for their, particularly their more junior members, to talk about these issues. It's quite easy for those conversations to be shut down. You know, of course we have to work for these clients because they're going to pay us. Whereas actually, I think it's really important to listen to people's points of views and put those views across. You know, no longer do many businesses work for certain sectors that are you know, recognized as harmful, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they were, you know, we didn't think twice about it. So that kind of change of perception is welcome, and it's coming into how we decide to work with our clients. But I think we find, you know, in terms of how can we evolve the business to reduce our emissions, to be more sustainable, there's zero pushback. When it comes to specifics, so I'm designing you know, there's a briefing, I need to answer it like this. You know, normally I would fly to 3, 4, 5 markets. You know, that's when the decisions start to come in. You know, and there's a tension sometimes between wanting to reduce the carbon emissions of a project and the, you know, the value that you might get out of it. And we still haven't resolved that. You know, but as I said, it's a conversation that's going on. Do we have a travel policy? Do we give everyone a carbon budget? You can use this much a year. Do we give each client a carbon budget? There's lots of thoughts about it. We haven't worked it out yet. But you know, part of the value of sessions like these and the collective effort that Jane talked about is that hopefully we will all share best practices, and we will learn off one another, and we will work out what works well.
Thank you. I noticed that as we carried on that Chloe had both said something and then responded to somebody. So she said, as a micro business, a grand term, or one woman band, which is a real term, I'm so cheered that you thought about how I can engage with this, and now I will. Then we had in from Cara, how do those who are not MRS company partners, i.e. smaller companies, sign up to the pledge? And Chloe answered it, I think, but you can tell her that she's right or wrong Jane.
You can certainly get the discount, Louella, on the green energy supplier if you're an individual member or a company partner. So that it applies to both. We have a scheme, I should also say, that if you are a sole trader, you can convert from being a member to a sole trader for free. There is no charge to it. So, but we have taken a decision that in order to sign up to both our pledges, you do have to be an accredited company partner or a sole trader, you know, or accredited sole trader. It's the same thing. Because there is a real challenge, and I think Jem has illustrated that very well, that whatever we do is real, that this isn't just a piece of paper you can sign up on and throw away. There has to be a real consequence if you decide not to do anything about it. And there's a lot of cynicism out there. You know, a lot of young people say, yeah, you would say that, wouldn't you? How are you going to deal with people who are just using this as wallpaper? And the answer is quite simple. We had two choices. We can set up another third-party sort of bureaucratic checking system, which is going to cost everyone a lot of money, because obviously we have to pay for it. And that's entirely valid, and a lot of people do that. You know, a lot of big inclusion companies make a lot of money out of providing these sort of checking systems. But we come back to the fact that we're not a high margin business, we are a business of small and medium-sized enterprises largely. So the best way of achieving everything at one stroke is to say, right, this is governed by the disciplinary processes of signing up to the code of conduct, which you do as a corporate partner. So therefore, if you are not doing the right thing, or there is any challenge against you, it can be managed by the code of conduct the way any other complaint would be, which means that there is no additional cost to signing up to either of the pledges. And this is something that has satisfied. We've had the challenge. The Senior Client Council have said exactly the same thing to us collectively. They are happy that the MRS Code of Conduct underpins the pledges, and they have not asked us to produce any more complicated systems. I mean, I know Jem has done his ISO work and and I think Steve, you probably have as well. The more of these we get, the more bureaucracy we have to do, the more cost there is. So this is about limiting costs to allow more people to join in.
So walk me through what might happen if either a member, a corporate member, or just a member says, okay, I think this company is guilty of greenwashing, and I don't believe what they're doing is what they say they're doing.
They can bring a complaint against the company like anybody else about under bringing the sector into disrepute. And that will then be addressed as any other complaint will be, and as seriously as any other complaint will be investigated. The company will be obviously entitled to respond and challenge, and it can go all the way up through our disciplinary systems. It could, you know, some of these things we solve at a very early stage because it's about lack of an understanding problem. But we do have very, very serious complaints that are upheld, which actually sanction members or companies that are found to be in breach. And companies that are found to be in breach do take this very seriously. They do take up legal challenges if the disciplinary hearing goes against them, because clearly it has an impact on business. So there is a serious route through, but it's not about sort of checking people before they do things. It's about honesty and risk-based approach. Now, there are problems with it. You know, that it would be great if we could have a huge system which did a sort of investors in people type checking, but I think other people might object to that too. So this is the route we've chosen to go down.
I was going to say, you know, are you geared up to actually investigating any of the claims? I mean, you need an audit, presumably, to actually double check that they're doing what they said they're doing. And that would be, as you say, tremendously expensive. So if somebody does lodge a complaint, does that audit come into being, or is part of another procedure, that a sort of straightforward complaints procedure that is applied elsewhere?
It is straightforward, and it is as applied elsewhere. You would ask the company involved to prove that they were doing what they were saying they were doing. So they would have to bring proof to us that they were doing what they said they were doing. And if they couldn't, then obviously the issue would start to get escalated.
So guilty till proved innocent.
No, innocent till proved guilty. Nobody's going to nobody is going to brag. And the other thing I should say, I mean, we are very clear about this. Our disciplinary processes are totally anonymous until they're adjudicated. So that protects both the company and the complainant. So that it is genuinely open to people to bring a complaint without risking themselves, but it is also not going to damage the company until it's been adjudicated on. So totally anonymous procedures.
Thank you.
Can I just quickly just jump in there? I it's a good point about you know, what happens if people don't fulfill their obligations and talk of disciplinary procedures. I completely understand. I would just like to point out that it's infinitesimally unlikely. The way that the pledge is designed is it's very simple and very transparent. You pledge to develop an environmental policy. You pledge to calculate and publish your emissions on you know, a verified website. You could cheat that if you wanted to. I cannot see any point, because it's all about reducing your emissions, but it's fairly pointless to lie. So there are many areas where you can actually be in breach, and I would you know, there are enough reasons for people to think, you know, oh, it's really hard work, I'm not going to do this. You know, if in the back of their mind, well, if I get it wrong, I might be disciplined, is another one. I would like to just quash that. There is no way that you would get any disciplinary anything against you if you just didn't quite get it right or find it complicated. You'd have to have a coal-fired power station in your office and be pretending that you were, you know, solar powered or something to for anything like this to happen. So that's yeah. Don't not do this because you might get disciplined, please.
I love the idea of people walking to the two bins that are available rather than having a bin underneath their desk. So I've got two questions, one of which is, are there any other hidden benefits to this? And also, you were talking about the difficulty of recruitment at the moment and getting people in. Is this going to be a selling tool that might lure people in?
Who are you asking that to me specifically or to everyone?
Well, both of you really, Steve and Jen.
You start, Steve. Go on.
Yeah, so there is another benefit, particularly when you're a company like mine, where people travel a lot. So people are actively now thinking about reducing travel, and actively coming up with ways of working asynchronously, working digitally, which obviously saves a lot of money. I should say, I mean, we fly economy anyway, but there's a big difference between whether you're flying economy or business. And so that would save people money because there's a very strong incentive to fly economy. And then in terms of people, I think this is part of what is important to attracting good, particularly younger people into a company. And maybe that's not even fair about younger people, just good people. Good people want to work for good companies, and good companies think about sustainability. They think about the environment, and just like they think about D&I. So I think it's the other thing I would say about going back to the previous conversation is one of the things we want to do is publish. So we want to just use transparency. Just everyone put their carbon figures up. Ours will be high. We suffer. We have a high carbon emission because we have large server farm costs through AWS, and we know that, and we're trying to do what we can to reduce them. And I'll accept that we're higher up the bad performing league table, but we are pledged to do something about it. So I think, and the idea that you would lie about it, I think the people internally would go up in arms. So yeah, I think that transparency has made lots of people now, for lots of people within the organisation, not me and not the other people who worked on becoming net zero, it just becomes part of the conversation when you're thinking about buying something. You start thinking, okay, what's the impact of that? And we've also got rid of bins, Jem, I should say.
Jem, do you have anything to add?
I just agree with both of those things. A business class flight emits 3 times as much carbon as an economy flight. So if that's not a reason to stop flying business class, I don't know what is. We have the same thing. Flights are pass-through costs. If you don't fly as much, your margins increase, and your business is more profitable. It's great. So there's definitely an added benefit there. There's also a benefit of looking at travel into work, commuting into work. We incentivize people through a bike to work scheme. Our healthcare provider, our health insurance provider incentivizes people for the number of steps they do a day. So you can both save carbon emissions and increase the health and well-being of everybody in the business by simple things like walking and cycling, and that's a win all round.
I have one more question before I sort of ask whether there are any others out there, which is, it came up in a feature that I'd commissioned out for this issue, and the author said employee churn in big companies can be measured as an element of sustainability by employee satisfaction surveys, but it's harder for smaller companies to preserve anonymity or to be able to cut the data meaningfully by role, stroke level, stroke department when there are fewer staff numbers. So what does the MRS recommend in terms of employee churn as an element of sustainability? And is that incorporated in the MRS net zero pledge?
Sorry, Louella, I dropped out there for a minute. I didn't hear the start of that.
Okay. Bear with me then. It came about as part of a feature that I'd commissioned, and the author said employee churn in big companies can be measured as an element of sustainability by employee satisfaction surveys. It's harder, however, for smaller companies to preserve anonymity or to be able to cut the data meaningfully by role, stroke level, stroke department when there are fewer staff numbers. What does the MRS recommend in terms of measuring it in that context? Trying to work out whether Jane's frozen or is deep in thought. I think she's frozen. I'm sorry, Jane. You can come back on that later, I promise.
She's going to come up with a really good answer after
I know,
this thinking.
suddenly from out of the blue. Oh dear. Have either of you got any comments on that? Because I mean, you must have some sympathy for companies that are smaller, and maybe you've been reliant in the past on employee satisfaction surveys. But if you're small and you want to keep an eye on what's going on in your company as to whether people are unhappy with what you're doing or happy, how and there's only a small number of bosses around, how do you keep on top of it?
Well, Jem mentioned Glassdoor, which is an obvious place to understand how people feel about your business. You can look at churn rate, which we do closely, and employee satisfaction. Even if you look at it in the aggregate, if you're a small company, I think the aggregate is absolutely fine. And frankly, if you're a small company, you can talk to people, can't you? Just have a chat.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions out there? I think poor old Jane has disappeared. Ooh. Do your employees ask where their pension funds are invested? And do you actively seek out sustainable investments?
I can answer this quickly and then let Jem have a go, just because it was a big topic. And Iona, who helped a lot, talks an awful lot about the importance of pension funds and where pensions are placed. As I mentioned at the beginning, we decided on progress over perfection. We have not tackled pensions in this. However, I suspect in a year or two, the pledge, or at least the things around the pledge and our recommendations to companies and pledgees, will include some things around finance and pension advice, because I think we all recognise it as one of the key areas where you can make a difference.
What do you reckon, Jem? And you're muted.
I absolutely agree. It's. I don't think it's widely enough known. So I missed to answer the question, but you are ahead of the game here. It is one of the biggest things a business or an individual can do alongside changing energy supplier you're looking at your air travel is change a pension scheme. We're all relying on Iona here because she was so good at that. She's got a great stat that having a sustainable pension is 21 times more effective than going veggie, giving up flying and switching energy provider. So it's pretty big. So the ICC, I think part of the role of the Insight Climate Collective is to go a little bit further than the MRS and working together, but suggest some next steps. And we're very clear about changing pension provider being something that businesses can look at. I think there's an interesting thing about finance. I think there's a perceived that finance is bad and pensions are bad and bankers are bad, but actually, as Steve alluded to earlier, they're all desperate to find sustainable businesses and sustainable funds to invest into. So many of the big pension companies, Aviva, Scottish Widow and Nest, have committed that their entire investment portfolios will be aligned with the Paris agreement, halving their emissions by 2030. So there are some really good options to switch pension providers to ones that are actively part of the solution, and definitely something to do. And again, in the ICC report, I'm holding up a blank bit of paper here. There is guidance on how to go about doing that. But Sam, thank you very much for the question, whoever brought it up.
Jane, thank you. Any other questions out there? Because if not, I think we'll probably call a halt. I mean, my only other query was, is the market research industry any different from the advertising industry in terms of how they're responding?
I think Jane will know better than us, but we've lost her, unfortunately. I think not. When we went through the calculator as well, it was interesting, and I've seen a couple of papers about it as well. We are very much like other professional services. Our emissions look like and feel like the same as other sort of professional services bodies, companies, and other professional services bodies are doing similar things. We're ahead of some, we're behind others. So I don't think hugely. I mean, they have more complicated emissions, or at least the ad agencies do, because there's the production side, and the production side can have very significant problems. But I also know people who are working on trying to green the production industry as well. So there's a lot of work going across the board. Yeah.
We've got a figure in the report, in a Net Zero Insight report, which compares the different consultancy-based industries. I think, if I remember correctly, we can feel pretty good because the average individual in market research has lower emissions than most other sectors, and certainly than advertising. So that's good. I think my take on it is the advertising sector is more developed in their response. They've been working on it longer. They're better at publicizing it, and they have some very strong activist groups working, doing really interesting things. They're purpose disruptors who are crowdfunding and crowdsourcing actual advertising and communication to specifically about this issue. And they also have a thing called Change the Brief, which encourages agencies to respond to briefs from a climate perspective, and that's something the Insight Climate Collective is very much looking at, how we might bring that sort of thinking into the Insight sector.
Okay, final one before Jane gets booted off again. You're asking for signatories to be sustainable by 2026, is that right? So is that the beginning or the end of 2026? And how many companies do you estimate will hit that deadline?
So yes, by the end of 2026, and I don't really have an estimate, but I would, when we're hoping to get 50 to 100 companies signed up in the next 18 months. I don't really see why almost any company that's not a company partner, should not sign up. So it's a question for MRS, how many company partners are there?
Over 700 company partners.
Well, let's go for that number then.
But a lot of them are clients. So
They should be there already.
They're the ones that I have challenged to see whether they can support the supply chain in doing some of these actions. Because one of the things that I think is really important, Unilever talks about the importance of its suppliers to its suppliers being compliant with its objectives in D&I and sustainability. But what they haven't yet is shown the colour of their money in terms of ensuring there's proper cash there. And I think I've just frozen again.
Yeah, just carry on, Jane. And I might also ask you, oh, you're back again. What David Preston has asked, sorry, just to be clear, what's our course of action if we are not MRS accredited company partners? So if you could sort of lay it out in words of two syllables.
Words of one syllable, they can live up to the pledge, but they can't get accreditation to the pledge. They have to become company partners, but we have so many ways you can do that. And to me, and I would say this, so thank you for permitting me to do it, it's really rather inexcusable if, one excuse I got last week is, we abide by the MRF pledge, so why do we actually have to be partners? And I thought, oh, come on, darlings. We're doing all this work on your behalf. It really can't be beyond the wit of woman, man, or whatever else. So, sorry, bad week. But it is a simple process to go through. And, we're the largest, oldest, and probably the ugliest in the world. So we must be doing something right. So I hope people will consider taking that step.
Thank you, one and all. I mean, I don't
know. Louella,
Yeah.
can I just add to that? So, yeah, I think what Jane's saying is join. But if you don't want to do that, the ICC is open to everyone who works in the insight industry, and we will be publishing our report. I actually agree that I think it's beneficial to businesses and to the industry to be part of the industry body. But if for some reason you're not going to do that, you can still get information and guidance from the Insight Climate Collective, which you can join if you search for the LinkedIn group.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? I mean, you've kept your viewers throughout, so not half bad. Thank you very much, and it will go up on the website soon. Cheers to one and all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh,